Um, she gave you the statistics, but what is really chilling and amazing to imagine is all the people that are alive today that would not be alive if not for you, Marcia. So. Okay, so Marcia has been working in the area of adults and extremely disturbed adults in her last 30 years, and I've been in the world of adolescent development and the treatment of teenagers, and I am not a DBT therapist. I refer to DBT, and I have used their principles in some of my work, as I'll go into, but I am very glad to unify some of the work that we're going to be talking about tonight. So our remote doesn't work. I'll be going back and forth and hopefully not mispressing here. Okay, so my goals are actually to talk about the social, emotional, and cognitive issues in adolescence that actually result in parent-child conflict, result in dysregulation. I also want to talk about the research on parenting styles and talk about outcome there, and I also want to talk a little bit about family systems, all of which I think complement what we've been talking about earlier. Now, this is one of my favorite slides. Thank you, Barbara Smaller. Thank you, The New Yorker. This little girl is not sharing her toys. She's 3 years old. You know, you really don't know how to share, take turns until about age 5, but this little girl is, 3, and her friend comes over and she says, I would share, but I'm not there developmentally. Now, I have this up here because it's very important to have realistic expectations when you're raising kids, not to mention treating kids in a practice. And I like to think that because the mom of this 3-year-old knows that it doesn't really happen regularly until about age 5, that she's kind, she's empathic, she's patient, she's understanding. But when you have a teenager like this, and he's 15 years old, and he says, get out of my room, I hate you, you're a terrible mother, you're a control freak, the question I have is that parent as kind and understanding and empathic as the mother of the 3-year-old? I would say not so much. We're not as good at realistic expectations. But if this boy actually had a little thought bubble and he said, I would control my anger and express my negative emotions in a respectful manner, but I'm not there developmentally. So since they don't have those thought bubbles, we need to know what's normal during adolescence. Okay, so one of the things that we developmentalists say all the time is that adolescence is a time of great risk and great opportunity. So you can see back and forth here. Yes, they go through puberty, there's more hormones, there's the remodeling of the prefrontal cortex, and I'll talk about it in a minute. There's more risk-taking and so forth. But we also have, on the flip side of the coin, we have the risk-taking that has to do with joining clubs, running for office, trying a new sport. Very, very impressive. Yes, we have increased romantic interests. Yes, most of them will be sexually active by the end of the second decade. But they also learn about relationships, intimacy, skills of being interpersonally connected over time and solve problems. Yes, they do experiment with drugs and alcohol, but they also, being in many situations over time, learn what is called by neuroscientists just thinking. They start to have a sixth sense about when danger's around and what they might do from having been in those situations before. So when kids take risks and try out for select soccer, we really like it. And when they audition for first chair in orchestra, we really like it. But when they actually go to a party, take off their clothes, take a picture, and of course post it, we don't like it so much. So you see what I mean? There's a lot of good things and there's the downside, but we as parents, we as practitioners see so many problems, we focus on some of the dangerous aspects. Okay, yes, they become more impressive cognitively as well. They're capable of abstract reasoning, syllogistic thought, symbolic thought, trigonometry, Heidegger versus Hannah Arendt and their philosophies. It's so impressive. However, it's erratic. And we also see egocentrism, the myth of immunity, it won't happen to me. And some of the abstract reasoning, which is very impressive. In fact, They have the capabilities in reasoning, spatial reasoning and problem solving at age 15 that it matches most adults in cold logic situations in the lab. However, on Saturday night, it's another thing. So on Friday, they can make an A on the test when it says, what's the delayed reaction time if you've had 3 beer and you're driving 50 miles an hour? Well, that's very impressive. They make it the A. What about Saturday night? So, for a long time, we said, my goodness, is this raging hormones? But now, actually, Apple did a little jobby on my Dell thing, too. Okay, anyway, now we have a new way of understanding some of that inconsistency, and it's the teen brain research. So in the neocortex, we have the prefrontal cortex, the thinking brain that's capable of planning, reasoning, weighing cost, benefits, and risk, and decision-making analysis, and the big one, impulse control. However, during the age of about 13, 14, there is a pruning and a sloughing off of neural branches, and so these functions are compromised. It's like if you imagine Seattle and all the arterials wiped out overnight, traffic system would be a little problematic, as well as the teen brain neural functions as well. So a summary would be, during adolescence, behavior is often governed by the limbic system, by the emotional parts of the brain, as opposed to the thinking part of the brain, especially in high arousal situations. So an example of this would be a typical situation that happened to one of my clients a couple years ago, where she thought it was a really good idea to put out on a Twitter. She tweeted 6 words. I think it was a haiku. It was big house, gel shots, no parents. Is that a haiku? I'm not sure that's a haiku. Anyway, so what was she thinking? Right? Well, she wasn't. She was aroused. She was impulsive. How many people do you think showed up at that house? 100? 200? Yeah. So there was a 23-year-old college kid. Note to self, this is part of your continuing ed. College kids aren't good at calling 911 immediately. They think they should be able to handle a situation like that. Even the lady next door came over and she couldn't handle it. 911 should have been called earlier. But anyway, lots of impulsive things where they're not thinking through the ramifications of their impulsive actions and choices. And in fact, this is why the Supreme Court, 2006, Roper versus Simmons, decided to disallow the capital punishment for minors. This research is why they changed the law. This is an interesting slide because it shows you that the limbic system is mature at about the age of 15, but look how much longer it takes for the prefrontal cortex to become mature. About age 23 for females, 25 for males, 2 more years for an ADHD brain. So between 13 and 25, well, and specifically between 18 and 25, we have our highest risk-taking among adolescents. Okay, so I decided I really wanted to write a book about the teen brain for the average parent. And I have my 14 chapters listed here for a reason. You can sort of see rudeness, risk-taking, lying, parent polarization, entitlement, distancing, a lot of problems. And this is short of DSM diagnosis, that parents will report that they have challenges in one of these areas in the average family. Not the family that's referred, not the family that has extreme problems, just the average family. The research has shown that much more than half, most teenagers will have more moodiness, emotional reactivity, and more risk-taking in adolescence. And this is why I think that DBT should be taught in every high school in health ed. I really do. Let's bring it. And why I called the book in a gentle kind of title, Getting to Calm. Only by getting to calm can an individual or a parent choose good strategies for solving problems. Okay, so this is a pictorial that was developed by a colleague and friend, Dr. Elizabeth Lin, who teaches mindfulness-based stress reduction at the Center for Child and Family Well-Being at the university. And MBSR, of course, has been an evidence-based treatment for dysregulation, and as Marcia said, she put it right into her entire program. But what I like about this slide is you can see that in the red trajectory, when people are upset, when their stress system is activated, that's the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system, and you have the release of adrenaline and stress cortisol, getting the body ready for siege. So it just closes down and gets ready for fight and flight. Go get the saber-toothed tiger, or run the other way, or maybe even freeze. He might pass you by. But basically, it's 100 million years old as compared to, this is only about 50,000 to 100,000 years old, and it's getting the body ready for siege. The body was not evolved to be in constant siege. It was ready for a sprint. It's supposed to be ready for a sprint, not a marathon every single day. And that's one of the problems of our stressful culture, right? Because we're commuting and we've got email to do when we get home and we have stress all the time. So what's the alternative is to have a mindful response, to be able to regulate your emotions, to get that heartbeat of about 100 beats a minute down to maybe 70, maybe 60. And that counteracts the sympathetic nervous system so that we can calm our bodies. Look at all the health problems that are created by constant stress. And by having a mindful response, you have an ability to get that physiological arousal down. If not, release oxytocin, the tend and befriend neurochemical, so that we can have even compassion toward those that live in our house and rather than treat them like a tiger. Okay, so the emotion system has two systems that I want to talk about, the threat system and the reward system. They're very strong, they're very powerful. In a contest, they always win over the thinking system. This was, part of our, again, 100 million year evolutionary history, that we need to be attracted to desires, we need to be repelled by poisons and tigers, and it's deep and it's primitive and it's strong. Teenagers are fundamentally different than adults in terms of the way they respond to dopamine. Dopamine is the neurochemical that's released in anticipation of rewards in the environment. We have many in common, like food, thirst, warmth, so forth. And then we all have our own little guilty pleasures, right? Some of you like your iPhone, some of you like cocktails or new cars or, NFL, whatever. But one of the things I talk about, I end up talking about it every evening, is the fact that kids are very easily addicted to fill in the blank. Cigarettes, alcohol, and their gadgets, and their technology. They are very sensitive to dopamine, right? They activate differently in response to it. The dopaminergic system is fundamentally different. So this is the ventral tegmental area and the nucleus accumbens. So when somebody sees their goodie in the environment, this starts shooting off neurons going straight to the prefrontal cortex, and it says, go get it, right? So it starts in the limbic system and it goes straight to the brain saying, go get that. So I have a person I want to tell you a little bit about. His name is Jeremy, but first, of course, I'm camouflaging everything to protect the innocent. But he said I could talk about him tonight. And when I first met him, one of the things that brought him to my office the first time, the mother had it because he was flunking at school, and the parent took all the gadgets, the eye this, the eye that, and and mainly Warcraft. And he went wild, and he actually crawled through the heating ducts of the house. I didn't think that was possible, except for in 007. But he actually went through the ducts, got the stuff. Mom said, God, I can't even lock myself in my room anymore. And that's when I met her. He did at that time something that literally in the last 2 weeks I've heard about 3 times. Another good continuing ed moment for the parents. And that is go into Amazon, change the password. Then once you're in, you can get the credit card because you've got it. Come on, I know you've got it in there already. Order all the computer stuff, then here's what's really smart. Have it delivered to the house that's for sale, so nobody's there, and then you go over there and you pick up the stuff. Isn't that brilliant? So see, this is how they're using their IQ points and their planning, reasoning. Anyway, so that was Jeremy. And that is because he is really thinking Warcraft is Warcrack. And remember the blackberries back in the old days, that old thing called and we all called them crackberries? because that's how much dopamine is released when you even look at that text floating up or that new email that you're looking forward to. Some of you, I probably triggered some of you right now, huh? Is anybody jumping for their phone? But really, if you were to see a brain, in an fMRI, like while the kid gets to see his game, sort of like your new lover or something, you would see that brain light up like a Christmas tree. It would really look just like they were flooded with cocaine. Okay, this is the threat system, and there's the amygdala that Marcia mentioned before. It's a little almond shaped structure right behind the eye, and this is that reptilian part of the brain, the fight-flight. So when Jeremy fights with his mother, I call it a co-amygdala hijack. That's what's going on. That system is activated. You love your family member, but in one of these hijacks, we treat them like they're the predator. Now, we often say that emotions are contagious. I love this picture over here. And so when you're resonating with somebody that you love and you're in a good moment, you sort of have these loops of good feeling. And yet when you're having a fight, it's loops of bad feeling. Okay, what do we do about this? Well, there are lots of areas of research in adolescence that are helpful for understanding, how we best bring teenagers through this time of life. I want to talk about these three areas: authoritative parenting, behavioral management, and healthy family systems. But they all require emotional regulation for us to pull off some of these strengths. Okay, now I could talk about each one of these, but I'm going to focus on the authoritative parenting research because it's so important. This research started about 50 years ago. Diana Baumrind, in Stanford, she did longitudinal research, which is the kind where you can actually determine causality. So she had 4-year-olds and then saw them back in the lab and saw the families at 8 and 11 and 15 and 18 and early 20s. And then she could really figure out, wow, what kind of parenting leads to best outcomes? Now, when we talk about best outcomes as psychologists, we're usually talking about high achievement, making it through school, going to college, getting good jobs, keeping the job, successful at the job, successful with relationships, stable relationships, and good psychological health. So lots of research on authoritative parenting predicting the best outcome. So what is it? So authoritative parenting is really at the midpoint of on a continuum where you have authoritarianism at one side and you have permissiveness and neglectful parenting on the other. And it has these very important 3 qualities of warmth and authority and psychological autonomy. Now, interestingly, I love to find in research review how brilliant minds think alike and brilliant research finds the same thing. So obviously, some of you know about the importance of secure attachment research and how that predicts positive outcomes. Very, very important. And notice warmth, secure attachment. Okay, also, what is authority? Of course, it is tapping into and interfacing with all the research we have on positive behavior management skills. And then psychological autonomy, a mouthful, but what it refers to is parents that put their focus, their emphasis on managing behavior, not thoughts and feelings. They don't try to get rid of negative emotions. We all have negative emotions. Yes, the average 12, 13, 14-year-old have to refine. It would be best if they refine the expression of those emotions when they say, I hate you and you suck and all those things by the end of adolescence. But these parents do not focus on that as much as behavior. They know that teenagers are individuating, forming new identities. They're going to have lots of different thoughts. They're going to, challenge the dominant paradigm. They're going to question religiosity, sexuality, educational goals, but they accept that. So that's the 3, I call it the holy triad of strengths that predict positive outcomes. So whenever we're working with parents, we're really trying to strengthen these 3 qualities. Okay, to say a little bit more about, that's interesting. It changed there, but not here. Okay. A little bit more about secure attachment and warmth. Notice the first one and the most important is what Marcia already talked about. Acceptance. Radical acceptance. I accept you exactly the way you are. It also refers to many of the things that you know about from babies. The parent is attuned, responsive, reliably there for you. They are respectful of feelings. They want to know the opinion of the teenager. The teenager wants to know their opinion as well. They're connected that way. The parent sees that that teenager as an individual, a separate person with separate feelings and thoughts. But let's go back to talking about a little bit more about unconditional acceptance. So after I wrote Getting to Calm, I couldn't help myself. I think DBT principles are so important, I want to drag them all right in and have everybody in the world know about them. Marcia is completely committed to helping the suffering people that have suicidal behavior and these extreme dysregulation problems, and I kind of want to just pull it out and give it to everybody else too. So that's why I named my book Wise-Minded Parenting, using her concept of wise mind, which refers to using your emotional strengths and your emotional awareness, as well as your logical and your cognitive strengths, uniting them and coming up with wise-minded ways of being effective and solving problems in relationships. We'll use an example in a minute. But notice I'm choosing one of her dialectics that she already mentioned, because whenever you have a change agenda, all of you right now can think about something you'd like to have different in your teenager, or yourself, or one of your clients. And in each one of those situations, we need to start with the bedrock of acceptance. That's why I have 2 cement eggs on the side of the scale. We must always bend in the side of acceptance first. So one of my little mantras straight from DBT is, when you're thinking of this individual, your child is doing the best he can given his emotional situation, his emotional state, his developmental stage, his situation in life, and he needs to do better. So that's one of the dialectics that goes with unconditional acceptance. Okay, in terms of authority, those of you that are therapists could do this in your sleep. We always have the same ones, the best skills to have as a parent. You want to have negotiation skills, ignoring skills, praise, avoidance of threats, all those things, nonviolence. But I want to really focus on one aspect of this. And that is that when you think of all of parenting as a pie diagram, look at how much should just be about positive interactions, listening, empathy, kindness, compassion, having good times. Did I say listening? I could say that over and over again. And then, of course, we have praise, and we have sticker charts, or we have, reinforcement for good behavior. We have limits. We have routines. And then we have down here, of course, we've got consequences. Now, the reason why I'm emphasizing this is by the time we see a client like Jeremy, he was flunking in school, he was addicted to his electronics, he had very few friends, only the ones that played Warcraft with him. And of course, from my story, he lies, he cheats, he steals, right? He's going to do anything to get that stuff. So he's got a lot of problems. So what happens is we just focus right in. That's what happens. Anxiety goes up. We have cognitive narrowing. We're just beady-eyed on that, predator out there, or that goodie that we want. And that we, as therapists, do that too. Okay, what's the problem list? What brings you here? And we get into the problem list, right? And really, we should open up that lens, broaden and build our perspective, and really focus just as much, especially initially, on strengths. So in any of the research, last year I did a review of all the behavior, the parenting interventions all over the world that were most effective. I have some listed here, Incredible Years, Raising Healthy Children, the one from the University of Washington by Rick Catalano and David Hawkins, and then we have Triple P from Australia. And these are programs, again, have been developed just like Marcia's over like 30 years, refined, and just very, very effective for interventions en masse. And look, they all come out with the same focal points. And I still want to say, in spite of all the way we want to get in there and change behavior is at the bottom of the list. Look at all the other things we do besides just get in there and change behavior. So, as I said, psychological autonomy is very important because it's about not changing negative emotions, but really a lot on accepting those emotions instead, and focusing instead on behavior. Okay, now let's jump in and talk about in in various situations. So this is a situation. Oh, I think I have 2 volunteers, don't I? Okay, so I'm going to present this story. I just wanted to meet you. I'll tell you where. And then can they use this one down here? Can we use that one? Okay, I'll give you the cue. Okay, here's Susan in the bad situation that she's in. She's wants to go to a party. It's a big bash, big kegger down in the Arboretum. And she, of course, is at a lot of parties happen there, just in case you didn't know. Foster Island specifically, just a little hint. And when you leave your house unsupervised, that's where the other parties are. Okay, so she wants to go to a party. She's very pressed to do that. She's insisting that she go, and this is a very typical exchange. Mom says, you better not go or you'll be grounded. Susan says, I hate you. You suck as a mother. You never let me do anything. Mom says, how dare you talk to me this way? You are heartless. You aren't going to that party, and give me that cell phone. And Susan says, of course, screw it. I'm going. You can't control me. Out she runs. And then Mom says, George, why are you making me do everything? Now, this isn't to make fun of men, really, because once you have a very activated parent, she's taking the activated chair, there's only one chair less activated, right? Because it could be swapped around. But George looks kind of bad here, but what's he supposed to do? Mom's just right in there. Okay, now, remember I said if we lead with emotions, we're not very effective. If we lead with logic, the reason mind, we're usually not very effective. So imagine Mom in the 15 minutes before this, when they first started arguing. She probably said something, well, of course, Susan, I'm not going to let you go. It's not in your best interest. It's illegal to drink underage. There could be gangbangers there. There could be a guy that pulls you behind a bush, date rape, anything. So, of course I'm not going to let you go. Now, all of this is very reasonable, isn't it? I have to say, 30 years of practice, I've never seen one of those arguments mean the kid says, oh, good point. I think I'll just stay home. Not once, not one time have I seen a kid go, now that you pointed all those brilliant points out, I think I just want to watch a movie with you and Dad. Zero, not once. But we all do it. I had not so much problem with emotion mind when we had our teenagers at home, but logic, reason mind I had a problem with. When they're attacking you, it's so tempting to say, I'm being reasonable. Here's my defense. Why do I have to do chores anyway? And you say, well, in a family, we all need to contribute. Never seen that work once either. Not once. So we tend to, this is what I think is really happening. This is scientific. Okay? It's thank you, Larson. Is just like somebody going, stay out of the garbage, Ginger, stay out of the garbage, stay out. That when we're in reason mind, this is what the kids are thinking. Blah, blah, Susan, blah, blah, Susan, right? They're not necessarily listening. So, what should be done instead? Okay, so here's what I call my wise-minded filter. First, the emotion mind. Calm the emotion mind. A wonderful mantra. Susan is doing the best she can given her emotional state. I stand between her and bliss in the Arboretum. Of course, she hates me. I'm just going to be, she's doing the best she can given her emotional state. And she needs to do better, but right now, what should be my goal? So the next one would be filter out the reason mind. Filter out being right. Stop being right. Very, very hard not to point out how you're right. Filter that out. I might be right, but am I effective? Say that over and over, and it really helps to quell the reason mind. Thirdly, what's a realistic goal? Is it realistic for Susan to be compliant necessarily by some magical, brilliant stroke of argument? Is Susan going to be happy with her? No. Probably the most realistic goal is I want to get through this and control myself. Another good idea would be to validate. As Marcia was saying, one of the most important skills is validate. It doesn't mean agreement. It doesn't mean approval. It just means I see things from your point of view, that this is the most important thing on the planet and I'm standing in the way of it. Might be a validation. Okay, responding to emotional needs, i.e., how frustrated and angry she is, not go on and on about the dangerous party. And not necessarily to put I call the red flag in front of the bull and talk about all the disciplinary actions that Mom's going to pull if she actually dares to go. Okay, so let's Don't you want to know what it looks like to have a good, wise mind in a situation? We're going to see it. Thank you. Could you come up? This gives me a little rest. Okay, who's Susan? Okay, good. Now, can you get your inner bad girl on?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to just stay here. No, they can do it. Yeah, because it's really short.
This sucks. Everyone is going. You have to let me go.
We're sticking to our rules, Susan. I'm sorry that you're so angry about it. I get it. You see us as standing in the way of your having a great time tonight.
Fine. If you get it, then let me go. You're making me crazy. I hate you. You don't care that you're ruining my life.
I'd like to help you figure out something else that might be fun to do tonight. We probably need to cool down first, though.
I want to go to the party. I'm going whether you give me your permission or not. I'm serious.
Well, I hope you don't. Look, I understand how disappointed you are. You feel like you're missing out on something really fun. You might want to take some time to think about that decision, though, and figure out what's best for you in the big picture.
Where's the leash? I'm taking Rufus for a walk. He's the only one who cares about me because you clearly don't.
Okay, so obviously Susan's not happy, but it's just like Marcia said, the validation just brought it down a notch. She's not going to be pleased with her mother. It's not going to get all gushy-rosy, but it's going to be less vitriolic, less volatile, and there's a chance after the dog walk she doesn't go. Over and over, when you don't say, no, you better not do that, you say, look, I hope you really think through it. I'd rather that you not. When you don't make it a direct adversarial power struggle, things calm down a bit. Okay, now I want to just say a little bit about systems. Obviously, every teen is in a family, is in a peer system, in a school, neighborhood, culture, and we want to talk about what is adolescence like for this girl, or this boy that just got out of juvie, or somebody with this condition. Now, I could go on and talk about the evidence base for intervening on the system at various systems level. I did that last Thursday. I'm not going to do it to you. Instead, I just want to tell you more about Jeremy. So what happened with Jeremy? Well, Jeremy, backstory, is one of two children that was adopted by these two parents, this Google family version of these parents, from Russia. And, of course, the sister, I say of course because we find this to be true so often, he calls himself the black sheep, and, of course, the daughter is the good one, the innocent lamb, and she has good grades, she's compliant, mom gets along great with her. But Jeremy is struggling, and then there's the dad. And dad is in the basement, figuratively and in IRL, because they want to be divorced, but this was right after the downturn, and they couldn't afford to get divorced. In 1 week, I saw 3 families, or I consulted on 3 families where they really wanted to be divorced. In any other time, they couldn't afford it. So dad's in the basement, and he's unemployed, and he drinks beer, and so does mom, but less so. And then Jeremy goes down there and, of course, has a nice little man cave, as he calls it, where he can do his gaming while dad's doing his TV. So, of course, mom is completely undermined, as she feels, and she is exhausted. She has had it. You know how I said when there are a lot of problems, you have cognitive narrowing? She had that little list: lying, cheating, stealing, electronic addiction, and failing. I mean, all that she could see. I was really trying to build some way of intervening on this family, and of course I wanted to meet the father. So I said, would you bring him in? And then mother says, and Jeremy agreed, he doesn't believe in therapy. We hear this all the time, and I always think that's interesting. I go, well, it's like not believing in washing machines. I mean, you don't have to use one, but they do exist. I mean, therapy does exist, But if you say you don't believe in it, it's sort of, out, down, spot, or story over. So I'm kind of shameless and intrepid because I worked at Children's Hospital, and oftentimes the fathers would be busy and the mothers were doing the child-related business there over time. And I learned to just, when they said, no, he doesn't want to come in, he doesn't do hospitals, I would just learn how to pick up the phone. It was just something I learned to do. So I'm shameless. I called him up and I begged, and I asked this father to come in, because I knew I wasn't going to get anywhere without some more leveraging in the system, not to mention working on that triangulation, we call it, that father was obviously working out his anger toward mother by saying, hey, come down here to the man cave. Who needs homework? But he, of course, probably thought he was going to get in trouble with me, so why would he come in? So I said, my typical, could you come in, please? You know, your views are important. I need you. Jeremy needs you. Well, he did, instead of, putting up with a stalker, he came in. So he comes in, and he comes right in my office. The first thing he goes is, oh, of course you've got a leather couch, So I said, fine, I'll sit on the couch, So he sits on the chair, and we start talking, and I said, what's your goal for Jeremy? And he said, well, finish school, get a job, of course, you numbskull therapist. And that was good. I said, well, that's good, because that's exactly what, we have in mind, because unless he gets to 8th grade, he certainly isn't going to get onto high school. So he's kind of at risk. So we're going pretty well. And then I said something about feelings. I started using the F word a little bit too much. And he said, oh, feelings, schmeelings. I said, he's not doing so well. He's kind of got a lot of depression going and so forth. And he said this feelings, schmeelings thing. And I thought things were going to get rough, so I just reached over for a New Yorker that I happened to have there for another cartoon therapeutic intervention. And I said, oh, feeling schmealing, so you must be of this philosophy. Here we have a farmer with a son, and he goes, this is the barn where we keep our feelings. If a feeling comes to you, just bring it in here and we'll lock it up. Okay? He thought this was great. He said, yeah, that's about it, No, now, what you're getting here is we got along because we could joke. He found out that I wasn't going to, just take him behind the barn, as it will, and flog him for being a bad parent. I really did need him. And so I said, we need to build up some positive moments. What can we do for Jeremy? And I go through the list. Could you bowl? No. Hike? What can we do together? Could you walk the dog? They did have a Labrador. This was my in. When you take a Labrador and you put it with a poodle, what do you get? That's what we did. They bred their dog, and they had a project. And you can make a lot of money in breeding Labradoodles. They're popular, right? And so they had a project they could do together. So notice I'm not flogging the father for undermining mother. Not yet. Anyway, no, I didn't end up flogging, but I said it would be useful for you to have the same rules for Jeremy. But again, what you're getting from the story is, what can we do positive with Jeremy? He has almost no life outside that computer, and he needs some fun. He needs something else. They literally went to Puyallup, and they learned about dog breeding. They had a litter. It was in the spring. You take them out in the front yard. Babe magnet, right? And, they got to know the neighbors. It was a really positive thing. This whole story is about what positives can we get going in the family. So, of course, as a family systems person, I had to deal with all of this other stuff too, because I needed as many inroads to helping Jeremy on that problem list as possible. We have the black sheep, father and son. We have the innocent lamb, mother and daughter. We got to switch that off because I really needed the parents to work together for Jeremy. So what do you do with a family? There's assessment. We can have our family, our problem list, but where are we going to intervene? I think it does take a village, and I did bring in the sister, and the sister helped with the homework. They were estranged because the sister did not approve of the original adoption. What right do you have to adopt when your marriage is on the rocks, even back then? So we had to do some patching up then. But, I think that it's fair to say that all of us need a little help here and there with families, even if it's not a big problem list. I find that even in the best of families that are very advantaged, there's usually at least a small problem list, and we're coming home kind of burnt out. And people always say, I love my family more than anything, but do they save anything for the evening? And especially since a lot of us come home to being a colicky family. This is a new diagnosis. Hungry, angry, tired, lonely, gas. It's just to say, in a funny way, I do not think we save enough of our good energy for the evenings. And I think we all need methods of getting to calm. I think mindfulness is to be recommended for just about anybody. This is another problem, is that we want to bond with our children, but how do we have quality time when by the time they hit about 13, they don't want to bond with us anymore, right? So sometimes the parents are very, very motivated, but what's left, right? Shopping and eating. So too bad we don't develop more pastimes. Now, I'm going to end on this, and that is, I've never said this in a group before, but I think we don't just need more calm time and more rituals, we need more loving times. And love is an incredibly positive and powerful emotion. I read a narrative last week about, it was by two CDC epidemiologists who were down in Sierra Leone, and they went to a clinic, and these nurses didn't have protective clothing, and a baby that was clearly infected with Ebola virus was sitting in a crib. And they couldn't help themselves. They had to take care of that baby, hold that baby. 19 out of 20 of those nurses died. They knew how you can get Ebola. They could not help themselves. And then we see last Friday with those kids that were sequestered for a while in Marysville before they were reunited with their families. And what happens? There's just hugging. Even footage today, hugging. They're still hugging. Now, I always think, do we need disaster? Do we need a hurricane? Do we need fear to bring us together? Because we all love our family members. But like Marcia was saying, we all want to be connected, but in the context of our busy lives, sometimes it doesn't always happen. We're busy. Even studies that have looked at people that, in one study it was actually ordained ministers, and they were given this task of you're about to give a lecture in the next building, and on the way over there was a camouflage actor that was an elderly man hurt and struggling in the street. They passed him by, the ordained ministers. Why? They were busy. And this was, the other thing was, they were preoccupied with the lecture that they were going to give. So we're all in this together, and yet we're busy and we're disconnected oftentimes. So I'm always wanting people to know, teenagers want to be connected with. We get intimidated, and they're doing all their developmental business of separating. Sometimes that intimidates us to make connection. But all adolescents want to be connected with. They want to belong. They want to be important. They even want to be needed. So it's up to us to figure that out. Thank you. I'm going to end there.